Hello, this is astrologynewsreport.com with your hosts, David Anton Savage and Ron Berger.
Now we go to our third segment of this week's report, People in the News, where we will analyze the Vedic astrology birth chart of a newsworthy person, place, or event.
This week we've decided to analyze the birth chart of Martin Luther King in honor of the recent national holiday celebrating his birth, which was on January 15th, 1929.
On that day, Martin Luther King was born in Atlanta, Georgia at 12 noon, which gives him an Aries Rising chart, quite the appropriate sign for a pioneer in human rights. He was a man of great forward thinking.
Certainly one of the most outstanding figures of the 20th century, along such greats as Gandhi and Nelson Mandela. Martin Luther King is one of history's greatest orators. Many of his speeches still have the power to move humanity and touch the hearts of millions around the globe some 50 years later.
He had a powerful sense of mission in his life, typical of Aries Rising. Let's see how the analysis of his chart supports that.
Well, first off, the rule of the chart, Mars, is a forceful planet, is placed in his second house of speech, together with an exalted Rahu, significator of transformation, which right away gives him great oratorical power.
And the lord of the second house, Venus, the planet of love and harmony, is in his 11th house of goals and ambitions, conjunct the moon, which is the significator of the public.
Moreover, the moon and Venus are together in Aquarius, the sign of the social reformer, the sign of sacrifice for a group goal.
The other thing which is quite well known about Dr. King is how profoundly religious he was. Biblical references are constantly interwoven into his public speaking. He was an intensely spiritual man.
And yet again, we see ample evidence of such things in his chart. Jupiter, the planet of morals and ethics, rules the 9th house of religion and destiny, as well as the 12th house of spirituality and enlightenment. Jupiter manifests the 9th and 12th house karma through its placement in the 1st house of self.
His was a life very much involved with beliefs and philosophies. This is confirmed by Saturn, the planet of karma, occupying his 9th house of destiny and religion. Another interesting fact about this placement: natural malefics, such as Saturn, when placed in the 9th house, are a signification of doing tapas, which means willingly going through great difficulty for the sake of spiritual advancement.
Yes, and he was arrested 29 times for his activism. He had great endurance, that's Saturn, and continued on his path regardless of powerful enemies inside and outside of the government.
He persisted, despite death threats against him and his family, too numerous to count, via the phone, the mailbox, and even a firebomb being thrown at his house. He even survived a stabbing.
This same Saturn is also a ruler of 10th house of career, status, and public life. The ruler of the 10th in the 9th means your actions and position in society are based on your beliefs.
In the 10th house is the Sun, the planet of authority, giving Dr. King the karma of position, power, and renown.
And the Sun rules the 5th house of past life credit, which is also the house of guidance and teaching. His first calling was to be a preacher.
Mercury, the planet of the intellect and communication, is here in the 10th house as well. For an Aries Rising chart, Mercury rules the 3rd house of skills and desires, and he obviously employed his skills in the service of his desire to accomplish a mission in his life.
The 11th house has both Venus, representing his 7th house of relationship, and the Moon, representing his 4th house of happiness. In the 11th house of associations, his whole life was about his relationships with the associations he formed or became part of.
Now let's analyze Dr. King's Mercury Major Period, which began in late December of 1955. All of the seminal events, all of the historic moments of his public life occurred during this period as well as his death.
This is a bit of a head-scratcher, Ron. In Vedic astrology, Mercury is a relatively weak planet, easily influenced, a neutral planet that becomes a temporal malefic or benefic, depending on who it is associated with. Mercury is just not viewed as a powerful planet, and Mercury is not even a very good planet for Aries rising people. But What Dr. King managed to achieve during his Mercury period was stunning, history-making and history-changing. And stranger still, Ron, he was assassinated during this amazing Mercury. What's going on?
Well, let's take a closer look at why the Mercury Major Period and its subperiods offered so much, and why did it all end at such a high cost to him personally. First off, since Mercury is influenced by whatever planet it associates with, notice its association with the Sun, the planet of power, which is very auspicious, especially in the 10th house.
Mercury in his chart is a Dusthana planet, since it rules both the 3rd house of efforts and the 6th house of struggle and enemies. Thus, it is a functional malefic for Aries Rising people.
Yes, but let's not forget that the 3rd house is also skills, and the 6th house is service, both manifesting through Mercury in his 10th house of career and under the influence of the Sun, which represents the 5th house of past life credit.
Mercury and the Sun are in the sign of Capricorn, the manager sign of the zodiac, the sign that takes on responsibility and accomplishes the goal. Although he was beset by many difficulties brought on by Mercury's rulership of the 6th house of enemies, he still accomplished very much in his lifetime.
You are beginning to hit upon the crux of the whole matter. There are two currents running side by side the entire time of his journey during his Mercury period. On the one hand, you have this man of love, peace, and nonviolence on his mission to end such social ills as segregation, racism, poverty, and inequality.
And yet on the other side, all along the way, powerful forces of evil and hatred were at work, out in the open and behind the scenes. He had enemies, known and unknown, inside the government and outside the government, who would not stop in trying to destroy him.
Yeah, and right from the beginning of the Mercury Major Period, the action began. On December 1st, 1955, when Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat, which was the spark for the Montgomery bus boycott. Martin Luther King was very much involved in the successful campaign, and likewise his karma for problems came with it. His home was firebombed barely 2 months later.
In May 1958, he began his K2 sub-period. Natally, K2, the planet of past life karma, is placed in the evil 8th house, in the very intense sign Scorpio. This really nasty karma manifested as an insane woman attacking him and nearly killing him. Isola Ware Curry plunged a letter opener through his sternum on September 20th of 1958.
And note that transiting K2 had just backed into Dr. King's 12th house, the house of assassins, the house of the unknown, and sneak attacks.
In the ensuing subperiods of Venus, the Sun, Moon, and Mars, spanning from mid-1959 through and up to mid-June 1965, Martin Luther King's success and strength as a leader continued to grow and expand, including a Nobel Peace Prize and making the cover of Time magazine's Man of the Year issue.
Yes, and all the while, Martin Luther King was getting more and more attention from powerful forces. The NSA was tracking him through their Minaret program. The FBI tapped his phones as part of the COINTELPRO operation, and they actually tried to blackmail him in the hope that he might commit suicide.
Yeah, really nasty.
By the time he hit his Rahu subperiod in mid-June of 1965, Dr. King had shifted his focus away from segregation and voting rights to socio-economic issues. And Rahu is the significator of goals.
And in this Rahu subperiod, there was a major turning point when he gave his Beyond Vietnam speech, and the very next day 168 newspapers across the nation denounced him. For the powers that be, this was a bridge too far.
At that time, the Vietnam War was a hot button for national patriotism, with the nightly news's body count a main vindicator of national righteousness. Opposing the war was tantamount to being disloyal to America.
Yes, hard to imagine now. Then he entered his Jupiter subperiod in May of 1968. And then the terrible day of tragedy when he was shot and killed on the evening of April 4th, 1968, an event that shocked the nation and the world and sparked riots all across America. But I have to say that, astrologically, Mercury-Jupiter does not really come to mind when thinking about death by assassination, Ron.
Not usually, but in this chart a major clue is Jupiter, being the ruler of the ninth house of destiny and beliefs, as well as the 12th house of spirituality, but also assassins. And his natal Jupiter is placed in his first house, the house of self and body. This is a combination with implications for martyrdom. He died for what he believed.
And get a load of the transits to his chart on the day of the event. On April 4th, 1968, 5 planets in his 12th house of endings and loss, and Mars, the planet of violence, transiting in his first house of self and body.
And let's quickly point out that something that causes a lot of confusion. Although Dr. King is Aries Rising and Mars is his ruling planet, a transiting Mars must be treated separately. Thus, Mars in the first house by transit still offers danger to the self and to the body through accident or violence.
Well then, let's get back to the issue of all those planets piled up in his 12th house in the sign of Pisces. It is significant by itself, but has extra importance because Jupiter, being the ruler of that sign, has activated this part of the chart at the time of his assassination.
Yeah, 3 malefics are clustered together in the late degrees of Pisces, the 12th house, being the Sun, Saturn, and Rahu.
This combo indicates to me very strongly the possibility of government involvement in his death, and probably through the CIA. There's an abundance of material out there that implicates the CIA.
The Sun is the planet of authority, Saturn is the established order, the establishment, and Rahu, a shadow planet, is a significator of spies and assassins. Astrologically speaking, there is a case to be made for a wider conspiracy of wrongdoing and evil from forces which could be the U.S. government.
How far down does the rabbit hole go? Who knows?
Well, with that, we're going to have to leave you until next week for another edition of AstrologyNewsReport.com.